Lane told us after the game, like the second play is when Dart kind of got banged up. Just from your perspective, what did you see out of him kind of that last 97% of the game, just
Yeah,
fighting through that?
he didn't look up to his full potential. Like you said, he was a little bit banged up for the whole game, but Dart's a tough guy, and he was able to play through it. And that's what you want in your quarterback, a guy who can, go out there and give it all on the line for them, no matter how they're feeling or, if they're a little bit banged up. So it was cool to see him go out there and battle through that, and during the bye week this week, we can get him back healthy.
Lane kind of attributed that to as part of the reason why the passing game he said was a little bit off this past Saturday and all that. Other than that, he said he also kind of wasn't helped to a certain degree. What do you feel like Lane's kind of referring to in that regard?
You said what? I'm sorry, I couldn't.
I mean, just talking about Dart's injury and all that, Lane attributed that to some of the offensive issues, especially kind of in the passing game this past Saturday. And he said that he also kind of wasn't helped too. What do you feel like Kiffin was referring to?
Yeah, whenever your quarterback's banged up a little bit, I feel like, that obviously is going to take a hit in the passing game just because timing is going to be off with his drops because, obviously with it being, any kind of lower body injury, his drop and things like that. So I think that's what he was probably kind of referring to a little bit. And obviously, they played straight man the whole game. So, the timing is going to be off anyway. And just with your quarterback being banged up, that's going to throw things off anyway.
What's kind of the takeaway in the locker room over this past three-game stretch, being able to kind of rebound after that Alabama game, but the two wins that y'all have gotten, what's kind of been the message for y'all?
Yeah, those two wins were huge. LSU at home and then Arkansas at home. Those are two tough teams, two teams who play physical, two teams who are really good on defense and offense. And, Arkansas was a huge win for us just because, they always play hard. No matter who the opponent is. But, in the past, we've had problems with them, just looking back at last year and the beating that they were able to put on us last year. It's huge just to go into the bye week with the win. I remember last year we lost to LSU going into the bye week, and, it was kind of like a regrouping period for us, but this year it's more like we just got to keep stacking and building from the previous wins that we've already had.
At this point this year, halfway through the season, how much further ahead do you feel you are than you were maybe after 6 games last year?
Yeah, I think I've taken tremendous steps from last year, just reevaluating myself from last year, just kind of me being a role player last year and then, kind of taking that next step this year, kind of being, the go-to guy on third down and things like that. That's huge for me, and, I take pride in that.
And just through your years of playing, how have you kind of approached a bye week in the past, and has it changed since your time at Ole Miss?
I think it's changed just because I'm a little bit older now. Just being a freshman, you kind of just want to go. And the more ball you play and, the more wear and tear you get on your body, you kind of just take a step back a little bit, but you got to make sure that you keep going and keep the blood flow going and things like that. So that way you don't go into next week, feeling like crap.
Halfway through his first season, what have you seen in Aiden and his progression in practices?
Yeah, I think Aiden has grown tremendously. I think, just all the freshman receivers that I've seen, I think that's probably one of the best camps that I've seen from a freshman. And he has tremendous potential to be one of, if not one of the greatest receivers to come out of Ole Miss. Just him being so young and, being tall and things like that and having the body frame.
I guess if it's a silly question, just tell me. But just, obviously you're focused on yourselves, going into a bye week and rightfully so and all that. But, with a bunch of games going on that with y'all not playing and all that, what's kind of maybe kind of the ones that you might try to keep an eye on, if you will?
Yeah, obviously, I'm going to watch the Auburn game just because that's who we have coming up. And then, just looking around the league, really, and, being in the position that we're in, some of these games kind of matter big time for us, to be able to go to Atlanta. So, just keeping an eye around the league and then definitely watching that Auburn game and seeing what they do schematically will be huge for us.
Just so players in the past we've talked to tell us that Wednesdays and Tuesdays are your guys' big days, I guess, in pads. What are Tuesdays and Wednesdays like through the bye week?
You know, actually today it was kind of amped up a little bit. It was more like a fall camp schedule. We were going against the defense, you know, good on good, ones on ones, pretty much the whole practice. There weren't any scout team periods, so just being able to get that work in, like I said, so that way you don't go into next week feeling like crap is huge. And just being able to go against, you know, your defense and get them better, and defense going against us and, you know, getting us better. It's a kind of like a jump start, really.
And just kind of on that topic, how much has maybe in August going up against that defense helped you guys on offense through this season?
I think it's helped a lot because, you know, a lot of the teams that we play is kind of like the same scheme as our defense. So it's good for the scout guys too, because, you know, they're not out here doing nothing crazy that they're not used to doing. You know, it's kind of just going in their scheme as it is. And I think that helps them. And obviously the scout team is a huge influence in how we play on Saturdays, because they're the ones giving us the looks all week. And if they don't prepare us, you know, for Saturday, then we're not going to be our best.
This is kind of a little bit another off the ball question too, but you coming from a group of 5 school at Louisville, and with that team surprising some guys this year and all that, just being part of a program like that, and when they're in that kind of conversation of, okay, maybe they may go to the playoff and all that, I mean, for those type of teams, is there a bigger chip on their shoulder than I think what other teams like maybe would think they would be? Or
Louisville's in Power 5. They're in the ACC.
My bad.
No, you're good. But I get what you were going. You know, the ACC is just in general is, you know, it's a different conference than the SEC. You know, you're playing bigger guys, you know, big physical guys and faster guys on defense. So, you know, just to see them in the conversation in general is still nice.
Thanks, Jordan.